Howdy, y'all, and welcome back. Today, we really needed to get some world records, some Guinness World Records on the podcast. So, we have Don Reichelt, who's done a bunch of different races. He won the 24-hour USA Championships last year, ran a 250-mile race, ran on a treadmill for 24 hours. So, let's just get right into this one. Here we go.
Really, I don't want to do javelina because I don't want to lose to you 3 times in the same year. Too old to just force myself into something I'm not sure if I can do great at. In my whole career is like I find what I'm good at and then I immediately get bored with that and then go try to find shit that like destroys me.
It's pretty much just a cold opening and do an intro leading into it, but yeah, we'll get started. I'm here with Don Reichelt, who has run an incredibly fast 100, 250 fixed time, and I believe you're in the Guinness Book of World Records, right?
I am, yeah, for the manual treadmill records. I have 3 of them.
So why would you decide to put yourself in a position to run on a treadmill for 24 hours? That seems so difficult.
Yeah, so total honesty, I'm a little cheap at times, and I was really just looking for a way to get a free treadmill. And so I was like, oh man, I've enjoyed running on manual treadmills in the past for short training runs, but they're really expensive. They're like $4 or $5 grand. I was like, I'm not paying that. Oh, I wonder if, so I started by thinking, oh, I wonder if I do like a 24-hour charity run or something and raise money for charity, if I could get this treadmill. And it turned into realizing that the records were really pretty low. And so I reached out to a salt runner and they're like, yeah, this sounds great. And they gave me a treadmill and I still did it for charity, which was the thing that I never compromised on. It's like, we're doing this for charity one way or another. It just so happens that there's the potential for the 12-hour, the 100-mile, and the 24-hour world record attached to it. And, yeah, we went out to New York City, got to sea level and got all 3 of them.
So it looked like there were lots of people around while you're doing this. Was it like that for all 24 hours? And was there a Guinness Book of World Records person watching in their like little outfit, their suit?
No. So Guinness has turned into more of like a marketing agency than anything these days. So they charge you if you wanted to mark like a person from Guinness there, it was like $20,000, even if it was for charity. It was like, so that was a hard no. So if you don't, so this is why if you look today that my name still isn't there because they're going through like ratifying it and all this stuff. And it's been almost a year. It's crazy. But we had to have two independent witnesses at every moment that could only work for a total of 4 hours. And there had to be volunteers. They couldn't be associated with me, my brands that I was working with, or the facility that I was in. So basically, it's really hard to find that many people in a city you're not from that don't know you or aren't associated with anybody that you know. So it took a lot of work. But we got basically these people to fill out journals and logs. If I stopped to go to the bathroom, they had to log like every second and distance. And then when I got back on, and then we had to provide an entire video of the entire thing, making sure the rules were basically I couldn't touch the handrails at all. Okay. Like if I even getting on, I could, or getting off, I could, but the belt had to be stopped. But like if I even stumbled and grabbed the handrails, technically it would invalidate the record. So like I was prepared to just totally eat it a few times if I was off balance or like at a trip instead of touching these stupid handrails. But yeah, so we abided by the rules. I used a laser measurement device that was basically measuring the belt speed instead of using the onboard computer, which was a little frustrating because the onboard computer read like 135 miles and then this belt measurer read 114 and a quarter or something like that at the end.
Whoa,
so
that's like, a huge difference.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. But that's why they force you to use something that's like a certified or that's calibrated to a certain degree, because every belt and every motor is a little bit different. The computers aren't calibrated.
Did you know it would be this big of an undertaking when you decided you wanted a free treadmill?
I had no idea. And even looking back, people ask me now, like, if anybody breaks your record, will you like go get it again? Like, absolutely not. Like, this thing was so hard. It's like, I have never done it was hard physically, but I've never done anything harder mentally in my life. Like, just standing on a treadmill without a motor, and this thing's like curve, right? So it's like an uphill at 2.5% or something like that. And it's like mentally at any given step, you're just like a foot from the ground being done. Like, it's like all you could think of when everything starts hurting is, man, like I could just step off and be done. Whereas you know this as well as I do, you go through a really low spot in a trail race, you could be 3 or 4 miles from the aid station and you can't stop anyway. So by the time you get to the aid station, it's like, oh, well, that wasn't that bad, I'm going to keep going. But I had like no carrot other than like, oh, there's a bunch of people here. I can't quit. Because we did it in a Lifetime Fitness. I partnered with the Lifetime Foundation. We raised a bunch of money for healthy meals in schools and training cafeteria staff to buy better ingredients for kids. And that was the goal, was to raise a bunch of money. So we did it in a Lifetime, and it was an active club in downtown Manhattan during New York City Marathon Week last year. So there's just a ton of foot traffic. And by the end, the last 30, 40 minutes, there's probably 300 or 400 people in the lobby screaming and yelling. And, at that point, all the pain went away, and I was running like 6:30 pace for a 10K or something at the end, just to really crank it out.
Yeah. When you know you're going to be doing it for 24 hours, do you have like a regimented plan of like take a break or anything? Because there's no aid station or stop or anything to even break up the monotony.
So I basically, so my only currency was time. Like, as long as I was on the belt and moving, like I was getting miles. And so I was very cautious on how I used that time. And I figured for the first 6 to 8 hours, the only times I wanted to stop was if I had to use the bathroom. And that worked out pretty well. What I didn't really consider was the repetitive use situation of really, like, I trained up to 40 miles on the assault runner before then. And on event day, when I started getting into the 50s and 60s, my hip flexors started going out and my hamstrings were going out. And then it became, okay, the top of every hour, I got off for like 3 or 4 minutes and stretched out a little bit. There was a guy that was volunteering. He was actually a physical therapist that just said, hey, like, I can help. You want me to stretch you out a little bit? And so we literally planned 3 minutes at the top of every hour. I got off. He did some manual work on my hamstring, and I got back on. And then from there, it was more just try to stay out as long as I can, walk, jog, do whatever, and then get off if I had to. Once I got over, so the previous 24-hour mark was 80 miles. Okay. That's where this. So once I hit 100 miles, I knew I had all 3 records. And then it was pretty much just, okay, walk a little bit, go eat some pizza, walk a little bit. So I hit 100 miles in like, it was like 19 hours or something like that. And then in the next 5 hours, I only made another 14 and change. I was committed to moving forward, but there wasn't a lot of, desire to suffer at that point.
Yeah. That video on your Instagram where you fist pump and get off, is that at the end or when you get the record? Now I'm curious.
That was at the end. That's the very end. Yeah. Yeah. That was a 24-hour when there's all like the people around and so I ran and my body shut down for a second. And I totally, I told my people too, I don't know how I'm going to respond, right? 24 hours on this stupid treadmill. Who knows what's going to happen when I step off, when I'm done. I don't know how it's going to feel. And so I emptied the tank and then I kind of stumbled off the treadmill.
Yeah, it looked like you might go down.
Yeah, I had 2 buddies there that kind of just kept me. And once I got my equilibrium, I was able to get up and high five the crowd. And there was a ton of energy in that room at that point. Man, definitely one of the coolest moments of my life.
Yeah. So you mentioned every hour doing a little bit of self-care, and I think that's one of the cooler things that you're pretty forward about on social media and stuff. How did you transition from the typical ultra runner who never stretches and eats junk? And what was the light bulb moment that's a little bit of effort and self-care and I can do things like run a 13-hour 100 miler and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's just I don't know. As I did more and more, I never got into the sport to win or be good. I just like doing hard things and challenging myself. So I figured out that I didn't like being injured and I liked running more than that. And so I started figuring out what that meant. And for what I do and how far I run, I'm still a pretty low mileage guy. I think even like going into Cocodona or some of these bigger races I've done this year, I think my biggest week is like 80 miles.
That's
Maybe
awesome.
right.
That's
And
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that are doing like, 120, 130, like a ton of miles. I realized I would, if I did that, I get injured. And so I figured out if I do in the 80s is kind of where thinking back, even when I ran my 13-hour 100, my biggest week was 82 miles. But with that, I do a lot of strength. I do a lot of mobility, and I do a lot of things that a lot of runners might neglect. And I realize that I can stay healthier and I can push harder in those 80 miles when I want to if I'm not doing 120 miles. Because I've done those weeks. I think my biggest week ever of training was like 150 miles and I was wrecked and
Yeah.
everything hurt. And now it's like, okay, 80 really quality miles mixed with 3 to 4 hours of strength training, either heavy with, squats, deadlifts, things like that, or it's just bands. Like body weight and bands can do a lot to activate and keep people healthy. And if you think about running, it's a linear series of one-legged stances. And if you're not
Mhm.
strong on one leg, you're not going to have a really great race. It might not be immediately, but after 80 miles, if you have one leg that's not as strong as the other leg, things are going to get a little wonky.
Yeah.
Basically, I just decided I wanted to eliminate those inconsistencies in my gait, and I focus on that just as much as I focus on running. And I think it's also given me more longevity in the sport. I started strength training when I decided I would rather never win a race again than not be able to run in my 50s and 60s. So I think I said that right? Like I'm willing to sacrifice today's speed and effort if it means I can be healthy for the next 20, 30 years of running. That's more important to me is making running and being outside and hiking and going up mountains a lifelong thing versus like selling it all out to be fast for a couple more years and then being wrecked and never wanting to run again. So there's a fine line there for me, but the strength training and the things outside of running have really helped that a lot.
Yeah, and I'm right with you on integrating like running and hiking and being outside. Like that's my main goal too. I think the races are really fun, like a different way to interact with society and people, but it's that getting outside thing that I don't know. It's interesting in the last 3 or 4 years, it seems like ultra running is sort of wanting to become this ESPN covered sport and losing sight of we're in
Yeah.
like the most beautiful areas of the country.
Yeah.
We could also enjoy them rather than hope the guy in front of us like slips and we can pass him or something.
I know. Yeah. It's interesting on like the social media switch of it too. It's like I struggle with that as, I work with some partners that are like, hey, get social media of all your runs. It's like, I'm not out in these beautiful mountains to just carry a camera the whole way. I'm out here to just look around and watch the birds and stuff. And so you're right. It's like we're getting all of this coverage and people are getting out there and it's great. It's fun to be able to watch a Cocodona end to end or a Western or a UTMB with commentators and things like that. But it's also, kind of taken away from the grassroots of just raw passion for being out in the mountains and doing hard things.
Yeah, and it is also crazy in like a Western states, the 300th person to get into that race, that's been their dream for 10 or 15 years and
Yeah.
they get very little coverage and they're enjoying it in a different way, yet they're running the exact same races.
Yeah.
Like Adam Peterman or Jim Walmsley or something.
Courtney.
It's just so crazy. Yeah, it's crazy that the same race can present itself so differently to people all over the field too.
Yeah, it's a showing up in the Lakers and the Celtics are there, but then there's also like a middle school basketball team playing at the court next door, and
Yeah.
It's like, well, like this is the weirdest tournament ever.
I know. You have like the best ever running, and then you have this person who can fit it in 30 miles a week and barely around his job and is
Right.
going for the same goal. It's such a
Yeah,
cool sport.
it's so cool. It's like I have so much respect for I was talking to somebody recently about I did Cruel Jewel last year as one of those races, just like I wanted to get my legs ripped off, and they were thoroughly ripped off. And it was, for me, it was like 32 hours. That's a 48-hour cutoff race. And there were people that took 47 plus hours. It's like I cannot imagine being out in those North Georgia woods for another night of kind of cold, wet rock and being miserable. I just have so much respect that people line up knowing it's going to take them every minute of the cutoff, and they might not even still make it. And yet they're still there. They still go through it. They still do what they can. And man, it is so cool to see just the difference and diversity in the sport as far as talent.
Yeah, and it's such a like a lesson in hope and persistence too, as they don't even completely know if they're gonna make the cutoffs
Right.
in time, and they keep pushing it like mile 70. Yeah, and I love your videos. You've gone out to Leadville a few times and shown golden hour, and it looks just so cool cheering in the last people fighting against that cutoff.
Man, it's just magic. Go to any race, I don't care what it is, and go to those last few finishers, and yeah, I'll be crying like a baby for like the last half an hour for sure. Like there's just so much emotion and passion and joy, and it's both the celebration watching those last few get in, and then also the unbelievable heartbreak of the guy or the gal that you can see, a half mile down the road when that final cutoff goes. It's like, damn, like they missed it by a half a mile. There was a guy this year at Western States on the track when the time got cut off, and missed it by like a minute and a half. And it's like, holy crap! And that person, like, they have given 100% of everything because they know they're up against it, and they're pushing and they're pushing and pushing, and there's probably nothing that they can go back and say like, oh, well, if I wouldn't have taken it easy at this point. Like, no, they know that the odds are against them at that point, and like just to dig that deep and to miss that goal is, I celebrate them anyway.
Yeah,
like it's so amazing.
it's 100 miles that they're covering. Like that's crazy in any amount of time, let alone
100%.
a day and a half, 2 days, whatever it may be.
Right. And just because there's an arbitrary cutoff doesn't mean they didn't just run 100 freaking miles.
Yeah, no, it's the wildest thing. And yeah, so I want to hit on your insanely fast 100. What is it like running a 100-miler at sub 8-minute pace? Like, do you get into a flow? Does time disappear? State. Because I can't imagine running 8-minute miles for 13 hours and 16 minutes, I believe.
Yeah. So that was the most flow state race I've ever run in my life. Like, I didn't really consider what was happening until about 100K in. Like it was so wild that like I didn't have to put effort in until about 100K in. I was actually
are you with music or no music, just in the moment?
I ran with most people in the space will know Arlen Glick, the first 100K or something of that race, and then he was cruising. He ended up running a 12:40 something there, and I knew I wasn't going to break 13 hours, but I knew if I ran really smart, I was still on the 13-ish. My goal is to go sub 8 pace, which I knew is like, it's like 13:19 or something like that. And so I was like, okay, I'm right there if I just run smart. So I let Arlen go at like 100K and ran alone for the next 30 miles, which wild. I was in fourth place at the time, going into going into mile 90, something like that. And you come up this hill and then you turn around until you can see who was in front of you. I knew that the guy, this guy Zach, who actually just won the jackpot USATF 100-miler, he was right ahead of me, and I was like, okay, like, I think I can catch him down. He's probably a half mile ahead of me, and I have at that point 6-7 miles to go. And so I kind of eased up the throttle a little bit, dropped back to like 730, something like that at mile 92, and then saw his headlight, and I threw the hammer down at mile 94, and I dropped like a 1935K at mile 95. And didn't stop. I think I dropped him, but I'm not looking back. My poor wife, there was an aid station with 4 miles to go, and she's there with a bottle. And the whole way we've been doing these like NASCAR pit stops where I just, I chuck a bottle and I just grab it from her, keep going, didn't stop at all. And I came in like just cruising, and I chucked the bottle, and I didn't really throw it down. I just threw it at her and grabbed it. Didn't say a word. And just kind of just blasted through. And later she's like, what the hell happened in that aid station? Because I thought this dude was right behind me still. And she's like, he was like 5 minutes behind you. And you came in and just threw a water bottle at me and ran through. No, but so I got to the finish, and then, I ended up third in that race, and with Arlen and the Tiger Bennett, and had ran like a 12:20 or something like that. Just a crazy, that was his debut 100, and ran that fast, which is bonkers to think about. But yeah, so that race, it actually went so well. And there was never that kind of that triage moment, or that I need to figure this out to keep moving. It actually screwed me up for quite a while in ultra running. Because mentally I started thinking that success only felt perfect. And when I would go into a race and something would go wrong, mentally I'd be like, today's not my day. It's not a perfect race. So it almost took me a full year after running a perfect race to get back to understanding that was the outlier. Like, that was not a normal experience for most people, or for me, and that things can go wrong and I can still do well, versus, this has gone wrong, it's not going to be my day, and kind of pull off the throttle. So it's funny how, the best race you run can really screw you up and affect all of the other races. But it took me some time, and it finally was working with the sports psych to kind of uncover that, dude, it's like, that is the outlier. That is not what you should expect going forward. And like, once that switch flipped again, I can appreciate that race, but I set it aside as the outlier, because nothing went wrong.
Yeah, that's so true. Because even last year I broke the John Muir Trail FKT, and that'd been a goal for like probably 4 or 5 years. And I got that, and I just have struggled in the FKT space to have the same fire, because it's like, well, I did the peak goal. It's so hard to feel like starting at zero again and do something that is, it's just finding that fire. It's such a good point of hit that audacious, perfect goal. And then it's like, well, I did it. What do I do now? I already did everything.
Yeah. And that's what set me off to doing Cruel Jewel and Cocodona and Jackpot. And it was like finding these next hardest things. It's like, once you kind of do your best, and it's like, could I run faster than 13:16? Like, maybe, if I have another absolutely perfect day, but the odds are against that. And it's like, okay, that it interests me to try that, but also now I want to go find that other thing that I chase perfection on, and it's probably going to be a lot harder, but it's a little bit more fun.
Yeah. And I like that analogy of like setting it aside. It's like, well, if I never run that fast again, that's okay, because I don't need to be trying to. I can do all these other adventures. And like, you've gotten into like fixed time and Cocodona and stuff like that. And I think it's so fascinating how it seems calculated on like Cocodona. Well, I've never had my legs destroyed for 2 days, so I'm going to go to Gorge and try all 3 days. Or I'm going to go do Jackpot and do 48 hours. Is that how you've always planned things out? Like this very, very regimented step up to both confidence and also physically?
Yeah, Cocodona, I definitely took a different approach, where I wanted to, I didn't obviously want to experience a 200-mile race leading into it, but I wanted to sample some of the misery that I was going to get. And even that, as you've now known for doing it a few times, like, there's nothing that can prepare you for running that far. Nothing at all. But yeah, so I wanted you to go do Gorge, because I wanted to just do a big training weekend, and it ended up turning to absolute mush because I got hailed on and sleeted on. It was like
Yeah.
30 degrees. I was like, why? So I pulled the plug in the 100K because I was so miserably cold. Why am I doing that? I'm training for the freaking hot race. What am I doing?
Yeah.
So I pulled out of that, and yeah, went to it was a jackpot. It turned up, the 48 turned up perfect, right? Like we
Yeah.
talked there, we raced there. My plan was to go a little harder than I should have intentionally for about the first 100, and then kind of just see what that second day felt like, because I've never done 2 nights in a race before ever. So that was the big unknown. Was kind of how I managed with being sleepy and tired, and then I wanted to artificially fatigue my legs in a pretty controlled setting, and it taught me a lot. What it unfortunately didn't teach me is, because I was always so close to the car, and if I did get sleepy I could just take a nap, was how freaking slow I got when I started getting tired on the trail and started hallucinating. And like I would be moving well at 10-minute pace at night, and then all of a sudden it's like 30-minute miles because I don't want to move because I'm tired. And it's like, looking back, it's like, okay, that didn't prepare me for how much I should have just taken a 20-minute trail nap a few times versus trying to force myself to continue on to get to the camper where the bed was in Cocodona. But I love learning in the sport, and there's so much to learn. And like, there's just so many opportunities that, here, try this thing. It's new for you. Here's a more controlled version of the thing you're trying to do for your A goal. That's kind of how I looked at it. Is like, what are the controlled ways that I can practice something that I'm going to have to do at a really tough level in Cocodona? And that's how I think about a lot of my training and racing is, okay, what's the A goal, and how can I work back to experience a little bit of it during my training?
Yeah, I think that's so smart. And with the athletes I coach, we work on, I mean, of course, you want to have the volume and physically ready, but there's also that huge emotional and mental confidence, just like that second night, like knowing you can get through it and things
Yeah.
like that, I think is probably means a lot more. Just like saying running 80 miles a week for a 250. That's all you need to do if you have those mental pieces in place too.
Yeah, definitely. If you're, what I've learned, my mileage is lower, but that means I have to be a lot more on top of the little things too during the race. So I spent a lot of time working with my nutrition, getting that dialed. Obviously, the strength is one piece, but yeah, there's just a lot of little things that you have to be really, really tight on to survive a 250, especially on 80 miles a week.
Yeah. So we both live where winters are pretty brutal. How do you train for, like, a lot of these races you're doing are in the spring? So
Oh,
how do you do that?
man, every year I keep telling myself I am done doing technical spring races, and every year I make this stupid decision. So like, it's, yeah, our trails still had snow on them at Cocodona this year. Like, I mean, it's beginning of May, we still had snow. And so, man, I suffered. There's it's actually where you passed me, that technical downhill, rocky downhill into Jerome,
Yeah.
where it's just like brutal, constant downhill. And I had no downhill rocky experience on my legs in like 6 months. And so like, I had nothing, and I'm not a good downhill trail runner to start, let alone not doing it in 6 months. And so I had no confidence. I was so slow. I ended up breaking. It's the same story from Cruel Jewel. And my quads started going out because I was so apprehensive going downhill. So yeah, I just need to be smarter, to be totally honest. Like, it's hard. It's so hard because most of I can get vert just fine on the gravel roads, but that doesn't really mean a whole heck of a lot when you go out to a Cruel Jewel or a Cocodona or something really technical in early season. So we'll see. I think I'm going to be a little smarter next year. Maybe find some more fixed time races on paved or gravel in the early season.
Yeah, though, I mean, fixed time's pretty fun too. But yeah,
It
me and
is.
Mike McKnight had the exact same conversation at like mile 70 when we were both struggling. It was like, why do we come out to this race when we both live where it's snowy? Because the heat just kills us each day. And he, of course, turned it around and won. But so
Dude,
what? Yeah.
that guy. Let's take a moment. So I was leaving whatever aid station that was at 50 something and going down the hill, and I see a headlight coming up, and I was like, what is this? And it was Mike. And he's like, how far is the aid station? He was so broken. And he apparently saw you. And I heard that you're the reason that he won the race.
I mean, me, Pete Kostelnick, and Mike. Mike was like, the medics say my back, there's nothing, my back is just bruised because he broke his back about a decade ago. And if it was injured or anything like that, he was going to quit. And he said the medics said that it was just bruised. And so Pete was just waking up because he was so far ahead of us. He actually took a nap, and he came out randomly at the same time. And it was just like, I was feeling awful. So it's just like, well, I'm going to keep going. Let's just all hike or jog this next section together. And we just quit caring during that section and had a good time. Mike's watch was in like Japanese for some reason. He was the definition of a mess.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it really is the smallest things, but it's that camaraderie too that's so fun.
100%. Yeah, he passed me again out of Jerome, and I can't believe he put like 20 hours on me in the last half of the race.
I mean, like everybody who basically put that much time on. It's so crazy. So what drew you to experiment with all these different kinds of races when it does seem like finding flat, fast 100 was probably like your forte? I mean, it's in like the top 50 fastest 100 times ever, I think.
Something like that. Yeah, it's I got into the sport to do really hard things and to push myself physically and mentally. And like, I know I can run a fast 100. I legitimately didn't know if I could do Cocodona. And that's what appealed to me. Like I wanted to sign up for the thing. I wanted to go out and do the thing that I didn't know I could do. I think often about, when I'm on my deathbed and I look back, it's like, how did I push myself to my limits? Did I find how good I could be, how fast I could be, how far I could run? And, Cocodona, I think, is just a progression of that curiosity. And I don't know, my mantra pretty much every single day is someday I'm going to go for my last run, whether that's tomorrow or today, whether I'm injured or I get hit by a bus and die. Like at some point I'm going to go on my last run. And I mean, that sounds morbid, especially, thinking that, I can't control that, but what I can control is finding enjoyment and pushing myself and doing epic things and knowing that the time I do have running, I'm going to take every advantage of it.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of new things, now I want to get into the idea of tiny bench. Where did this come from, and how has it progressed?
So this is actually a pretty fun story. So it starts off wild. So when I moved into my house about just over 3 years ago now, we started getting random packages from Wayfair, like just out of the blue. And so we explored it. We were like, this is not our stuff. Like, what happened? And so a Chinese company listed our address as their US address so they could claim to be a US company through Wayfair. And so anytime that anybody returns a package to that company, it comes to me. and so we have worked with like the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and Wayfair, and it won't stop. We cannot stop getting random shit delivered to us. And I'm talking, we've probably gotten 100 stainless steel sinks and maybe 120 shower heads. And like all of the bookshelves in my office are from Wayfair, because the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, they're like, you can keep everything you get because like nobody's coming after this stuff. So keep it, sell it, do whatever. And so we donate most of it to the Habitat for Humanity because it's like sinks and showers and I don't need 100 freaking stainless steel sinks. So we donate most of it, but every once in a while we get something. They're like, yeah, this is unique. We'll keep this. So we got this tiny bench from Wayfair, like from this company that's illegally listing my address. And we put it together, and it's so tiny and it's so funny. And so we were going to give it to a friend of my wife's because she has 2 little girls. And we're like, yeah, that's perfect. But it was sitting in our living room for a couple of weeks. And then I had this buddy that stayed with me right before the Leadville 100. And we're both 6 foot, 170 pound dudes. And I just joked, I'm like, oh, let's sit on the bench and grab a picture real quick. And we started having a conversation on the bench. And like it literally just on the spot was like, bro, I'm going to record a tiny conversation with you right now. And he's a pilot. And so I'm like, this is the pilot episode of my new series.
Wow.
And it literally just in the moment, it was like, this is going to be a tiny interview. It's going to be 5 minutes. Let's go with it, see how it goes. And so I just started as a joke with this free bench that we got from this company that literally is like illegally using my address, but it's been so much fun. It's not serious. It's fun. It's goofy. I've started interviewing strangers on it. So just setting up at a trailhead and being like, hey, like, do you want to have a quick conversation with me on the tiny bench? So I really release a new episode every Monday. Next Monday will be my first like total stranger interview with this recently retired woman named Lily, and her dog joined me on the bench. But
Wow.
I'm having fun with it. Like it's goofy, it's fun, it's what this world should be all about, just creating cool content.
And did you have the bench at Leadville then too? Did you take it?
Yeah, I travel with it. It's so small. It fits, like I can break it down. It goes in my truck really easily. I can actually get it into my wheeled duffel bag. So I'm going to bring it, like whenever I fly, I'm going to break it down and travel with it and literally just see where this bench takes me.
Wow, this is awesome. What do you think the most weight that bench has held so far is?
So this guy, he goes by Big Bob. He's 6'8", 275, and I'm 6 foot. I'm like 168 right now. So that's a considerable amount as well. We're 400 pounds, right?
Yeah, we're getting near 450.
Yeah. So I don't think I would push it much further than that. I probably don't want to put 450 on it again, but it's a sturdy little thing, man. Like it is impressive. And at the end of the day, we're like an inch and a half off the ground. So if it happens to break, it's not like we're at risk.
Yeah, that's very true. What's your favorite interview you've done so far? People are going to go watch one.
I'm going to give you two. I know you just said one, but so this guy, Cody Lefevre, he owns the gym here in town. This is probably just more outside of my realm. He's former Marine and very like cerebral when it comes to training and reasons and mental. So that was a very deep interview. So the name of the series is Tiny Bench Big Questions. And I try to get a couple of big questions fit in, and he went deep on his big question answer. So I really loved how thoughtful and how thought-provoking some of his responses were. And then the other one that I really liked was hearing from JP Giblin, who just won Leadville 100 a handful of weeks ago. His story is pretty dang cool, from signing up for Leadman back in 2015, which is the same year that I did it, which was my first ultra, and then going to the Navy and then coming back and sharing some of what he learned in the Navy. And then the biggest story that it sticks with me, that was really cool in that episode, was hearing how JP was struggling early, and Rob Krar came up behind him and gave him just like a little, come on, let's go, or keep it up, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And Rob Krar has been JP's hero for most of his career, and he wants, and hearing JP share like what switch that flipped in his brain, that really brief little moment that led him to winning Leadville, it's one of the coolest stories I've heard on the bench.
Yeah, that is awesome. Did you get him like right after he finished? Because that would be epic.
No, I got him like 5 weeks after the race, unfortunately. But yeah, it would be someday. I'm going to have the tiny bench like right at the finish line and do finish line interviews.
So I'm thinking Western States. They're going to join your tiny bench, and then they'll go talk to Dylan, because you guys are teammates anyways.
Yeah. I'll get him first.
Or maybe sideline reporter during Western, like at mile 70, they sit down and do a quick interview.
That would be hilarious. You know what I think I wanted to do? Dylan's got the winners. That's fine. He'll get the top 10. Let me get the last 10. I want to hear those stories.
Yeah.
Let me hear the battle stories of the person that finished, in golden hour. That would be, I think, more meaningful to me than, don't get me wrong. Tom Evans is incredible and Courtney's incredible. I'd love to interview him, but sometimes those stories that come out of the hard, we started this conversation talking about that. Those are the stories that I like to hear.
Yeah, when you can talk to them about like how many years they've been out there trying to do this
Yeah.
miler. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Okay, I got two more questions for you. When is the Dawn signature shoe coming out?
Well, it was actually supposed to be the shoe that ended up Dylan's shoe.
Oh,
So
okay.
so that shoe is actually my brainchild that came out of Leadville 2 years ago. And then when Dylan signed, I'd been running in it. And when Dylan signed, we gave it to him because he has a little bit bigger platform. Not sure is the actual answer. We have a couple different ideas of what we're going to do with it, but not 100% sure. The next one out is, I think, Liam Lonsdale's, which is the GS Oak, and then there's going to be the what is it? The Silverton shoe, Avery Collins' shoe is kind of the next one from there. So hopefully I'll slot in after that, but I'm not too worried about it. It's just cool seeing what they're doing with custom stuff. There's, with Cam Hanes, he's doing a lot of stuff with his shoe. It's a polarizing shoe. The blood splatter is not for everybody. It took me a while to warm up to it, but seeing that's pretty cool how broad that shoe is getting.
Yeah, and anyone turned off by it, I encourage them to at least hear the story of why it's there. And it's not it's not focused on killing. So yeah,
and that's what flipped it for me too. When I first saw the rendering, because if you ever see Cam Hanes' Instagram, you're like, it's a lot of dead animals and hunting and stuff like that. So I was immediately turned off. And then I actually heard the story of why he put that on there, and it's just like, hard work and blood, sweat, and tears of putting your everything into it. And it's like, okay, well, I can actually wear this shoe now because I believe in that. I don't necessarily want to see dead animals on my Instagram all day, every day, though.
Yeah. Are you a carbon plate in or out guy?
Depends on the terrain and how fast I'm planning on being. That's the beauty of the shoe, right? Like you can take it in or out. So if I am going probably faster than 8-minute pace in the GS, TAM, or PGH, I'll have it in, or on very rocky terrain where it then acts more of like a rock plate than anything like that. But I like to mix it up.
Cool. All right. Last question. What is the most fun run or the most fun you've had running ever?
The most fun I've had running ever.
Or the best run that sticks in your mind.
I mean, I can take this a lot of different directions. I have a couple of funny streaking stories from college, but that's a different podcast. But those are some pretty memorable runs. I think there's a couple different ways to answer that question. I think there's the type B fun, right? Of like, it's done, it's in my past, and like, man, I'm really glad I did that. And that's the Cocodonas of like, that thing destroyed me. It ate me up for mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, like you name it, like it destroyed me. But because of that, I'm better today and I'm stronger today. And I have nothing but unbelievable positive experiences to say from that. So that's probably the first thing that comes to my mind is Cocodona, just because of how much it forced me to struggle. Because I learned a lot and I enjoyed that. And then I'm actually going to get a little bit more micro as I think about that. So my wife has been crewing me for 5 or 6 years now. We've been married for 5 years, and she's been by my side for pretty much every one of my races during that time. And she's not a runner. She doesn't really run. She will run a little bit, but she's a pretty big power lifter and just enjoys it. So she has never been able to pace me in a race until Cocodona. And so those were, I don't know if I'd say fun, because it was that stupid section in the cow pasture and that like 5.8 mile section. I've totally blocked it out at this point what that was called, but it. Anybody listening knows it. Like, it's just the worst section is like 2 miles of road and 3 miles of cow pasture. Yeah. And just terrible miles. But I got to run with my wife for the first time ever in a race, and that was pretty special. That's something I'll never forget and just really meaningful.
And wow, that is really cool.
Yeah, I have a cool picture of it on my Instagram somewhere. That's one of the cool things about Cocodona is it's not fast. You don't have to be fast to crew or pace somebody. And so I gotta run with my wife. So that definitely is without a doubt, the most memorable 5 miles I've probably ever run.
Nice.
So yeah, it's probably how I'll leave that answer.
Okay. I love it. I mean, I think that that's what it's all about. Your partner and finding where your Venn diagrams overlap in your realm. And it's when she's probably, you can call it a run, but it's probably a lot of walking along that section.
Yeah, a lot of walking, a lot of looking at your watch to see if you're on the breadcrumbs of the trail, because the grass is taller than the flags, and you're like, I have no idea where I'm supposed to be going through here.
Yep, exactly. Everyone probably took a different route. You could just overlay them all in there. Crazy.
Yeah, it's like I can see Kevin Goldberg up over there with his crew, and I'm over here on this hill, and I know he didn't get here to there. So like, where are we going?
Yeah, I love it. It's such a cool race. It takes, I don't know, I think 200's cool, but that extra 50 is where you really learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah. Are you going back?
Yeah, going back for, I think this will be 1,000 miles of Cocodona this year if I can finish it. So 4 years of this crazy thing.
That's wild. Good for you. I'll be back someday. I'll say that. I'm not this year. The 200-mile distance really intrigues me of getting it right, just because there's so many little things to get right. I look back, I think I can take a ton of time off just if I change my sleep strategy, and become friends with my hallucinations a little bit better.
Yeah. And 200 milers, I don't know that many people have a good first one. It's the second one where there's the breakthrough. So yeah, someday
I'll get there, man.
Yeah. Well, thanks for jumping on. This was super fun. Love the stories and hearing about, I mean, I'm not inspired to run on a treadmill, but I love hearing about your stories of doing it.
Thanks, brother. Well, always good to catch up, and we'll have to figure out when we're in the same city or anywhere close, and I'll get the tiny bends up your way.
Oh yeah, perfect. I'm all over the place. I'm sure we'll cross paths soon.